Werner Herzog.
Well, there's not much introduction I should do now because we have the opportunity to discuss films in between the two shows. You probably know that there's a great German film out there made in 1924 by Friedrich Murnau. In my opinion, the best German film ever made. And it was, in a way, good for me to connect with the German film, the silent era of the 20s, which gave me some sort of a solid basis to start from. The second film is Cobra Verde. That was my last film with Klaus Kinski. After that, it was clear we would not collaborate anymore, and he went on to do a film, Kinski/Paganini, which for 15 years he tried to persuade me to direct that film, but he had to do it himself. He always was of the opinion that he was a far better director, indeed the best in the world ever. So I think it was good that he did it himself. So please enjoy the films, and we'll be together during the two shows. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our Werner Herzog. What a thrill to see it again in English, because you shot it in English and in German. You filmed two versions, and this is the rarer version.
Yeah, and it's the version which I personally do not like that much. The German version has more cultural authenticity. Mm-hmm. Although most of it was shot in English, the lip movements were English, but you can tell that Kinski at that time didn't really speak English very well. He thought he was the best English speaker in the world, but it was hard to persuade him otherwise. So yes, that's a little bit of a problem with this version.
Well,
but I can live with it.
You know, in terms of what you said earlier about Murnau, it's very moving too, because not much of it is spoken. It's a very silent film. I mean, there's music and with usually with the vampire films, the pressure, many of them have a romantic kind of cliche, and you resist that pressure, as I think Murnau did. I wonder, is that an accurate reading?
Well, Murnau's film has a lot of other connotations. There's some sort of an impending doom which apparently he sensed coming upon Germany. The film was made 10 years before Hitler seized power. And some of the films, and it's not only his film, somehow sensed something coming.
Yes.
There was a prophetic sort of thing going on. And Murnau's film is much more, or the vampire is much more a creature which has no human qualities. He's almost like an insect.
Yes.
And here in my version, I wanted to endow the vampire with longings, and he wants to participate in love. He does not want to live on forever, and there's an abject pain in him that he cannot die.
Yes.
So, of course, there's quite a few distinctions, but in a way, the film has some flair of a silent movie about it.
Yes. There is. I want to ask you about the cast, and I want to start with a particularly wonderful performance by Roland Topor, who is a cartoonist primarily, also a novelist. He wrote a novel called The Tenant, which Roman Polanski a couple of years before Nosferatu made into a film. And could you talk about working with him and also all the cast? But
Roland Topor is a man whom I saw in a press conference at the Cannes Film Festival And I saw him from quite some distance, and I was immediately attracted to him because at the oddest moments in his speech, he would laugh.
That giggle.
It is this very, very strange laugh. And I approached him. I didn't know who he was, and found out and asked him whether he would play a man who was completely demented but would have his kind of odd laughter in it. And he said, yes, I understand you. I'll try my best. And the other cast, yes, Isabella Gianni. Extraordinary, very beautiful.
But she's also kind of a Cassandra figure, you know, like of ancient Troy. She's the one who sees what's coming all along, and that's, I think, unusual.
Very early, yes.
Yes,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unusual in the vampire genre.
Yeah.
So she has a special role in it. Bruno Ganz,
Yes.
one of the very, very best actors in the German-speaking theater, and also in many films. So you have seen him recently in as Hitler in the
Downfall.
The
Yes.
Downfall. He's very, very good in this film. He was always very good.
Yes. Yes.
And who else? Kinski, of course. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
no vampire like him.
Yeah, really. What any special memories of working with him on, you know, just trying to create the vampire? What were your discussions, or did you have them?
Well, most of it was about his way to move. For example, how he would move his fingers, and I told him the fingers should be like a tarantula, very slowly, and how he would move it, and how he would approach Jonathan, and very abruptly sometimes things would happen.
Yes.
Like a viper that strikes, and sometimes very, very slowly when he approaches Isabella Gianni.
Yeah.
It has to be very, very erotic, very slow. You take any time you need. And in some instances, for example, when the vampire dies and he gets the sunlight onto him, and his eyes are blinded, and I was close and with a camera, and I said to him, Klaus, you take your time until you collapse. And I took almost the entire time right after the slate to see him breathing inwards, and then when he collapses. And Kinski had a way to do things with abruptness that was always surprising. So I would leave him alone with that, and I knew he would not be dead right away. He should have convulsions on the ground, and he said, yes, I'm gonna do it. And he had limited space, so he couldn't be out of frame easily, which sometimes he would do just to make a point that the camera was slow and stupid and things like that. So.
Now, you filmed it in Delft, which of course is known, I mean, that was the city of Vermeer, and it's a magnificent, the images that you got of that city. But I remember reading that they had just gotten rid of rats the year before, and here you came with this production.
Well, I didn't come as a surprise, because I asked the town council to bring 10 or 11,000 rats, which went into long discussions. But finally, when I brought them some plans that we would not lose a single rat, and we actually never lost a single rat. They agreed, but there were vicious newspaper articles against the production, and then there was a famous Battle of Delft. We had the rats stored out in a huge barn outside of town, and we had given the farmers money to buy food for the rats. They had special feed. And somebody ran away with the money, and then they didn't want to give us the rats anymore. They wanted more money, and then it was a huge thing, because I broke open the barn myself, and some people out there, one man, a fat, ugly, feisty man, ran amok, and he came with a caterpillar at us and smashed the windows of our truck, and there were 4 people sitting in there, and it got really out of hand. So I intimidated him to a point that he gave up. And I confiscated the key of this caterpillar with this huge shovel. And then police arrived, but they were far too late, and they blocked the exit and entrance, which was some sort of a causeway. And there were these 2 police cars, and while they were inside and listening to what was going on, we rolled one of the police cars into the ditch so that we could get out with our truck. So there was always trouble around the rats.
I want to open it up to questions from the audience. Your question first, sir. Yes.
Can you speak up a little bit?
And I may repeat the question. I may repeat the question
okay,
too.
yeah.
For the
I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on what you said before the film, how it was such an honor to remake what you consider the greatest German film, and did you at any point feel kind of that doing this film, remaking it in color with sound would be blasphemous almost to the beauty of the original?
Yeah.
He asks you to elaborate on your admiration for Murnau. Did you feel any trepidation creating a new vocabulary, color, and so forth?
No, not really. And I knew it shouldn't be a real remake. Murnau's film looks quite different, and it has a more simple story. And lots of dialogues and scenes in the film do not happen in Murnau's film. It's more like an homage to Murnau, and I wouldn't be pedantic and make a film a precise remake and going back to black and white. I knew the film would have its own aesthetic, it would go its own course, and it was clearly understood this was a gesture of reverence to Murnau. And of course, one thing that was precisely taken from Murnau's film, and his film is the only film where the vampire has fangs, the ears, and his claws. So that was a precise remodeling of Kinski into Max Schreck, who was the actor for Murnau.
Okay.
But there was nothing wrong about it. I felt much safer after I'd done the film and I had connected to the great films of the Weimar epoch.
Your question there, sir. Yes, Dirk Center. Yes.
I'm always fascinated by your musical choices that you use in film. The wonderful biographies is great. What is your process for that? Do you hear a piece and just put it away in your mind for a certain point in time, or are you often just inspired on the fly? Change a certain musical piece?
Music and
The choice of music, part of it is composed for the film by Florian Fricke, or the group Popol Vuh, but he was basically the only person, played almost all instruments himself, and a great friend of mine who unfortunately died. He's not with us anymore. And a good other amount of music was, for example, Wagner. I think Siegfried's Erwachen. And there was also towards the end when everybody is out in the town square dancing, and they are just celebrating the last days that they are alive because they all got the plague. That is from the former Georgian Soviet Republic, a choir which I loved. And you see, I never spent much time in making choices. They come to me very quickly, and I normally do not test one or two pieces more than one or two or three pieces, and I'm right there on target. And it has happened to all my other films as well. So until most recently, editors are always kind of amazed, how do I do it? It comes very natural to me. Yeah.
question right here.
I want to ask you, do you stay in the editing room when you are finished with your...
Do you stay in the editing room?
Yes, every day, very diligently, and in the editing room I work 9 to 5, pretty much precisely. Here in Los Angeles, 10 to 6, because I try to avoid the morning traffic. So and with great discipline. And what I do, I edit very fast. I've always edited very fast. Now, of course, it goes much faster since I'm editing digitally. And I can edit almost as fast as I'm thinking. So Grizzly Man was edited in 9 days, but also I wrote the commentary and I recorded it and I did a primitive mix. My son, what have you done was delivered in its final cut 5 days after principal photography was finished. The film Bad Lieutenant, but in both films, in both last films, I had the editor on the set. Most of the time he would spend on the set because he was curious. But he would edit and put things together in some sort of order, and in the evenings we would edit, and Bad Lieutenant was delivered 2 weeks after end of principal photography. So I like editing and I like storytelling, how it evolves and how you establish a certain rhythm. And the rhythm, by the way, always is established in my films, and it should be in many others, in my opinion. It's established during shooting. You cannot establish the flow or the rhythm of a movie later in post-production. Too many things are being delegated nowadays far down the line into post-production. In many things you cannot edit and you cannot fix in post-production. Bad acting you cannot fix. Certain things you cannot fix with digital effects. It's just mostly during shooting, although I do not shoot materials for editing so that I know exactly I'm jumping now into a close-up, or so I'm not planning like that during shooting. So editing is a very intense work, and here I'm working with a very, very fine editor, Joe Beanie, who has done my last 12 or 14 films. And I enjoy this part of the work. I enjoy everything that has to do with cinema, including acting, for example. Yeah.
Do you pre-visualize the film beforehand, or is it something that has to emerge intuitively on the set?
I do see an entire film in front of my eyes. That's why I write screenplays so fast. Mm-hmm. I've never written more than a week on a screenplay because I see it, and it's like anyone else could copy it. I can write as fast as I would copy a screenplay. So I can write 20 pages a day, let's say, because I do other things. I answer the phone and I do errands, but let's say it's an average 20 pages, and in 5 days you've got 100 pages. Right. So that's easy to handle. But of course during shooting a lot of things are entering into it. I keep the floodgates open for things that I like and that I observe, or people that I like and bring into the film. Mm-hmm. In the last films, for example, Bad Lieutenant, iguanas, they were not in the screenplay or not in any production plan, but all of a sudden I thought we need iguanas. So it works like that.
Your questions are there, yes.
Yeah, I had 2 questions actually.
Okay.
Was there any resistance on the part of the cast or crew in shooting the film in English as well, or were there any strange experiences that happened with that? And then also, could you talk about the making of the opening sequence?
Okay, the 2 questions.
Yeah.
One was, are there any resistance from the part of the cast with working in English? And then talk, if you will, about the making of the opening sequence.
No, we had to settle on one language because that was the only commonly spoken language on the set. Isabella Adjani spoke English, and people from Holland spoke English, but we had all sorts of people in there, people who would speak only Dutch, so it was a little bit harder with them. But that's one of the necessities of making a movie. You have to settle into a common language which allows you to to organize real dialogue. The other question was the opening sequence. That was mummies in Mexico, in Guanajuato, and I had seen them when I was a very young man, and I had been in the States, and I had to leave the country, and went across the border and lived for half a year in Mexico, near Guanajuato, and that's where I discovered these mummies. And at that time there was a long underground corridor, and they were all leaning against the wall. And when I returned 15 years later or so to do this film, they were all put into glass cages. And I bribed one of the people there of the cemetery to take them out from the glass cages and lean them against the wall again, so which we did.
What era, how many years have they been mummified? How many centuries? What do they
No,
do?
that's about, I would say, most of them more than 100 years, 100, 150, 200 years. It's simply because Guanajuato is in a very narrow valley with steep slopes on either side. The cemetery doesn't have much space, so they excavate dead bodies after 15 or 20 years, and because of the climate and probably the chemical constitution of the soil, many of the bodies mummify. Of course it's a question, how do you do things like this, and those were real human beings, but I had the feeling I should do it anyway, because they were out on exhibit, I mean for like in a museum now, in glass cages. So.
Your question, sir.
I was wondering if you could...
Can you speak a little louder?
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit more about your approach to working with actors? How much leeway do you give them? And have you ever done anything unorthodox to motivate them?
He's asking about your work with actors. What do you have to do to motivate them? Have you ever done anything unorthodox?
Yes, always unorthodox in a way. I think so, yeah. But there's no school that I follow, and I think it's kind of very, very stupid what the actor studio is doing to acting. There's something utterly wrong about it, and it started. I saw what was it? Rebel Without a Cause. Just a few days for the first time, and I thought, what's the name of the leading actor?
That's James Dean.
James Dean, yes, James Dean, and I thought he's one of these crippled actors, crippled by the actor studio. So I think there's something not right with following a straight method or so, in whichever way it would go. But I work in a very intensive way with actors, always on the set. I do not assemble them weeks before and read the screenplay and discuss things. And sometimes my challenges are very, very clear and short. For example, Nicolas Cage, I said to him, I will take you where you have not been before. So he understood it as a challenge. And he said to me on the second day or third day of shooting, he knew that I hated to have discussions with motivations, and so actors who are constantly into the quest of motivation, normally they are the ones who have nothing to offer and are those who have very little substance in them. And he said to me, I know you hate these questions, but what makes him so bad? Is it the drugs? Is it the Hurricane Katrina? Is it my childhood? Is it whatever? Or is it the corruption in town? And I said to him, no, forget about all this, but there is such a thing as the bliss of evil. That's what you are going to go for it. And he does it, and that was basically our discussion. Or, for example, how should he move physically because he has an injured back, a hurt back? And I said it would be nice if you had a slightly slanted shoulder line preceded by your gaze. That was all I told him, and he does it very, very beautiful, like his head like a vulture over this slanted shoulder line. So sometimes I'm more precise, and I do it like with Bruno S., who worked on 2 films, Kaspar Hauser and Stroszek, with me sometimes. I said to him, this is the first word, and then count till 3, and then you say the next one. Take a breath, and then you continue the entire sentence. So sometimes with that kind of precision. But it really depends on with whom I'm working. And on the same set with 3 actors, I speak in three different tongues with them, so to speak.
On Heart of Glass, I recall that you had actually used hypnosis to
Yes.
achieve certain effects. Did you use that at all here, or?
No, it's in Heart of Glass. It had a clear position and a clear reason, because it's about a village community that lapses into some sort of collective trance, and like sleepwalkers, I walk into a disaster that is foreseen and prophesied. And I made tests with actors under hypnosis, but so deep under hypnosis that they could open their eyes without waking up. And then what I didn't know, can 2 persons or several persons under hypnosis communicate in dialogue? Yes, they can. And so I decided I would do the film with all the actors under hypnosis, but their eyes open. And so you have this very, very strange fluidity and slow movements and this very strange absent looks that look through you almost. And so that was an unusual thing. And it required a lot of attention, because when you hypnotize someone, you have to very carefully take the person back out of hypnosis. So it's as important as to induce a state of hypnosis. And in one incident, an elderly man refused to wake up. He just said no. And it took me 2.5 hours to get him out, and so that was sometimes it was unusual and not foreseeable all the time. And when I spoke to the crew, I said to Jörg Schmidt-Reitwein, the same cinematographer like in this film, I said, move a little bit to the left. 24 people in a country inn would move to the left, because I didn't speak in the tongue in which I would speak to them. So I had a much more formal, much more elevated sort of talking to the actors under hypnosis than to the technical crew. So
I want to make sure I'm not neglecting somebody way up there in the top there.
yes, there's somebody waving.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
This gentleman
Please.
waving, and then anybody in the balcony. Yes.
Was Klaus Kinski known for giving a hard time to other directors and crews as he did to you?
Yes, of course, that was his trademark. He had been in theater productions which he ruined by not showing up, or by insulting the audience and throwing a burning candelabra into the audience. So he would, and normally he would do it because he didn't know his text, and he forgot his text after 10 minutes, and then he would scream at the audience and yell at them and insult them and roll himself up in a carpet and not emerge again for half an hour until the curtain went down. So, and he had destroyed sets in other productions in rages of fits, in fits of anger and throwing tantrums, and has ruined quite a few movie productions. And in all the 205 or so films that he made, he normally he normally is present in these films only for 1 or maybe 2 minutes, because that meant 1 day of shooting, maximum 2 days of shooting. Nobody could take him any longer than that, with a few exceptions. There's one spaghetti western by Corbucci, where he plays the leading, or one of the leading parts. But most of the time you see Kinski fairly close and doing dialogue. You never see him in dialogue with others, because the others fled, and he had to speak to some sort of a mark that was given to him for eyeline. So that was the way to deal with him. And I'm the one who somehow was capable to make all his craze and his hysterics and his tantrums, which were normally beyond the moment a camera was rolling, I made it productive for a screen. So, but don't ask how tough that was. And I made five films with him.
Did he ever thank you in any way? I mean, did he ever come across in some vulnerable way? Because you gave him a lot.
No, he would never do it publicly. He'd never, ever, because he would only rave and rant in public and denounce me and heap invectives on me, which was in a way very funny. Sometimes I even helped him out with the Oxford Dictionary to find even more vile expressions and old-fashioned, almost extinct expressions to make his speech more flowery. But yes, there were moments where he quietly acknowledged, and where it was clear, for example, when we went through the rapids with one of the 2 ships that we had for Fitzcarraldo. And he went on board, and because I told him we will be 6 people on board and we would be filming as we were going through the rapids, and I will be on board, and he said, if you are on board, I'll come along. If you perish, I will perish with you. So he said that very quietly, and we didn't make a big fuss, and he came on board. So there were moments where it was clear he acknowledged that there was something special going on. And in a way he was physically afraid of me. Although I was the one who was very quiet, very silent, and I could stand his onslaught without moving an inch. So because he would normally scream at that distance at you and get froth at his mouth, and so I just took it as it was and enjoyed and I enjoyed the vista.
Are there any questions up in the balcony that I've not seen? Anybody up there? Okay. And down here, well, hang on just in case your questions are in the back and then yours.
I wanted to ask, was there a lot of room for improvisation, or were you really critical about sticking to the script?
Improvisation or sticking to the script?
If anything comes along better than the screenplay is immediately dismissed. And sometimes the screenplay reads very beautifully, and when the actors proclaim them or speak them, it all of a sudden it sounds like paper. And I immediately take them aside and say, how do we do it? How would you say it to me, but in your words, the same sort of meaning. And in 10, 20 seconds I change the screenplay. That goes very quickly. And improvisation sounds like not having a clear idea what to do. Yes, I do have a clear idea. I know what the substance of the scene is, and I know what the mood of the scene is, and I know what the rhythm of the scene is, and many other details. So, but quite often I introduce things that are unexpected even to myself sometimes. It goes very quick, and I have developed a sense of keeping shooting very, very creative and alive, and make it fascinating for the actors and also the crew. They all like to work with me, and because of that, and sometimes timid crews that have not worked with me ask me when I shot one scene in Bad Lieutenant, and it's basically one single take, and the camera follows and moves in and out, and then I say that was the end of the scene. I shot it 3 times, that was that. And then the crew asked me, where is the coverage? What coverage do you shoot? And I didn't even know until very recently what coverage meant. Coverage means the cowardly position to film from all different other angles to save yourself in editing if you made mistakes. So the way I'm shooting is kind of risky because I do not cover, and because of that, I know that I have to be very precise, even within invented moments. It's a great amount of discipline which has to be exercised. But that's what makes movie making so beautiful, that you have to have a very firm grip on a scene, and at the same time go beyond all the kind of discipline that is rigor and the strictures of a scene, and bring an amount of life in it that you normally do not have on a set in the film industry here, or in the film industry in Japan or in France or in Italy. And yet, even though lots of things were brought into the film spontaneously in Nosferatu, or in the following film, Cobra Verde, you do not notice that these elements are ad hoc at the moment taken into it.
Your question.
So you're so prolific and you write these screenplays so quickly. How do you pick your next project? Do you have a pile of things that you're doing, or do you say, oh, this is the next project? And
How do you pick your next project if you generate scripts that quickly? Do you have a pile that you're trying to choose from?
No, I do not have a pile, but it's not that I make much choices. They come at me, and sometimes I keep saying, yeah, they are like burglars in the night who all of a sudden stir in my kitchen, and I wake up and all of a sudden I see uninvited guests. And quite often now, I've done 3 films last year, I finished 3 films last year. Now I have, on Monday I'm going to France and start shooting a film, and there's at least 3-4 feature films that are ready to be made, but I haven't written the screenplays. In one case it depends very much on 2 actresses that I would need. In some other cases it depends on, can I raise the finances, which one can be done first, which one can I get rid of first. So, but I'm not sitting on a stack of screenplays. I wish I could go to the Caribbean, do nothing and have...
Yes, the gentleman along the aisle there, yes, you, yes.
Having seen several of your Kinski films and the related documentaries, is it fair to say that using him in a movie, however satisfying the results, makes the shooting more of an ordeal?
However satisfying the films you made with Kinski, was the shooting more of an ordeal when you look back on it?
Oh, who cares? Who cares that it was difficult? And who cares that Marlon Brando during the making of On the Waterfront was the ultimate pestilence? Who cares? It doesn't really matter. And Kinski was Marlon Brando in his worst moments was kindergarten against Kinski. But yeah, who cares? Who cares? These things disappear into the abyss of time, and what remains is a film, and he's phenomenal. And it was not, you see, the problem was not Kinski alone, because all the other actors and the crew members became rebellious, and they said, we are not gonna take this skunk, this pestilence, one more minute, and we are walking off. So I had to keep the crew and the other actors on board. So they became a problem. So Kinski was only the epicenter of things. But who cares?
Time for a couple more questions. Your question, sir. Yes.
Yeah, you've often likened your fiction filmmaking to documentaries, and I've seen some of your movies where it seems like you incorporate just sort of like the background people that are there in the town into your movies. And can you tell a little bit just about how you motivate? How do you show up with the crew and just motivate people to participate in your movies?
Questions about the fine line of fiction and documentary, with particular attention to the natural townspeople that you often have in the background. I'm thinking like the gypsies in the Nosferatu, for instance. And,
yeah. Well, that's a very normal work a director has to do, to motivate crew. They are always, you see, when you have a real good project, the crew is always motivated. And the actors are always, in a way, motivated. They start to wear down, of course, and they get tired. And when shooting goes on a long time, or like in Fitzcarraldo, shooting wasn't that long, but we had a lot of interruptions, torrential rainfalls, and 2 plane crashes, and all sorts of things that came in between. So how do you keep them motivated? I don't really know. But it's also a question of leadership. You have to have that when you're a director. That's one of the natural prerequisites of doing a film. And you have to have a clear vision. And if you do not follow a vision and you are trying to fish in the dark in all directions, a crew immediately senses that in 5 minutes flat, they know you are competent or you are not competent. So it has never been a problem for me to keep a crew on board, with a few exceptions. Fitzcarraldo, because nobody believed I could move the ship over the mountain. And there were close to 1,000 extras deep in the jungle with me and crew members, technical crew, and there was not one left who believed I could do it. So those are the bitter moments. They were still working with me, but they treated me with a kind of tenderness. You are treating somebody who is insane and needs to be protected against himself. So, but that's the work you have to do as a director, and I get paid for that, to keep a crew on board and keep them creative and keep them liking the film that we are doing. But it's only via substance of a project and via the vision that you have.
Tell us about Cobra Verde before we see it. Well, I guess you've talked several times about Fitzcarraldo. I'm wondering if you saw, going to Africa with Kinski as yet another adventure in the line of Fitzcarraldo and Aguirre.
Yeah, well, Kinski was sort of out. He got completely out of control, and certain things that I was going to film, he just wouldn't show up on the set. So, and he became physically violent, which was not very pleasant, and he was completely into the mood of his film Kinski Paganini, which he wanted me to do for him as a director. He had written a screenplay which was 600 pages, and alternating from each half page, it was fiddling and fornication and fornication and fiddling, and it was 600 pages long. So and it was beyond repair, and he had moved himself, psyched himself up into this evil character of Paganini. So it was not easy to somehow push Paganini aside and have the bandit Cobra Verde here on the set. And what else can I say? So in a way, some of the film is a little bit fragmentary. And I decided to shoot the more difficult part, the African part first, knowing that Kinski, like a hybrid racehorse, who could just run a mile and then collapse, but here he had to go 2 miles. So how to keep him standing and keep him moving. And I thought the more difficult part in Africa had to be done first, and then I would go to Brazil. Some of it actually was shot in Colombia and a few things in Brazil. So that was a difficult thing to do. And after we were done with the film, it was absolutely clear for me that this was the last time we would have worked together. I mean, the 5th film, which was as in itself kind of remarkable, 5 films with him. And I told him that I would not be able to discover any other facet in him. And of course he knew that it was over, and then he made Paganini a few years later, and then he died. So.
Well, we have this film to look forward to, and tomorrow night, come see. In addition to Strozek, you have Wojciech, which is another Kinski film.
Phenomenal performance by Kinski as Wojciech. But Strozek, the film I made with Bruno S., my second film I made with Bruno S., that is probably the person who is more intense and more moving and more tragic than any other actor with whom I've worked. Actually, he was not a professional actor, but I do not make the distinction. For me, an actor is whoever is good on a screen is an actor. So, and Bruno S. Is probably arguably the best I've ever worked with. And Kinski, he outdoes Kinski, and he outdoes anyone else with whom I have worked. So,
thank you so much.
Here tomorrow as well.
Thank you all.